What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Accounting Flow podcast brought to you by Financial Sense. This podcast is dedicated to taking a deep dive into accounting firm workflow and processes. Each episode, we will spend 20 minutes interviewing actual accounting firm owners just like you, uncovering specific processes that firm owners and operators encounter on a daily basis and discuss ways to improve them. Let's go. All right, we are back with another episode of Accounting Flow here with Jesse and Tom from FinOptimal. Going to talk to us a little bit about finance automation. What's up, fellas?
Yo, what's up? Thanks for having us.
I'm stoked to have this conversation because not only, from my understanding, you guys offer services, you're a services firm, but also have been building some pretty cool products. Jesse, can you kind of give us a little bit of history on who FinOptimal is, how you started, and then we can start working into some products?
Sure. I began doing books. That's how I began my career. I was at LimeWire and, I had to do AP data entry. I had to do monthly journal entries. I had to do, monthly accruals, presentation of financial statements to the controller, to the CFO. And I was working with a lot of programmers and I really enjoyed writing code. I wanted to learn to code and I started automating my own job and, carry that forward through sort of increasingly responsible finance related roles, controller, CFO. I later did the same thing at D.E. Shaw where I started automating financial operations, FinOp, and eventually started thinking to myself, I can do this for QuickBooks. I can do this for third-party companies. I started taking clients, built a book of business, and then eventually thought maybe I can scale this up and started doing it full time. So here we are.
And what year was that you started FinOptimal full time?
I started full time in 2021. So, right. We'd been doing it. I'd been doing it for probably 5 or 6 years at that point. And, in the last year, we've decided to productize some of the software that we previously only used for our service clients. We call it the magic. And, we're trying to make the magic available to other accounting firms. So
to be fair, other people called it the magic and then we took it.
Yes, right? One of our clients called it the magic.
That's a pretty cocky thing to just be like, it
is. It's true. It's true.
Other people said that
first.
Wear
it. If the shoe fits, wear it.
And I'll be honest, Roman, people today don't know that. And they'll see a demo and they'll be like, this is like magic. And I'm like, look at the subdomain and it's the magic.finoptimal.com. And they're like, holy crap.
Is it really? So magic.finoptimal, is that where the product?
The magic is, it's like a lot of you like app.finoptimal. Ours is the magic.finoptimal. That is where you go to like log into the actual platform. And we did that. And now people see demos and they're like, wait, what? How did you?
It was our first big client. The CFO of our first big client was trying to understand how the software worked, like how the process was going to be modified once we put our software in. We're still doing the books for that company, 8 years later.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, so I enter this data into the spreadsheet and then the magic will create a bill in BD. Yeah, that's right. That's how it works. So from then he started calling it the magic and we kind of ran with it.
And I suspect a lot of clients, it may feel like magic to them. And a lot of them probably don't really care how the sausage gets made. They just care how the sausage tastes, right? And so, you've taken this approach to building up your skill set in coding, Jesse. And I suspect that you have been coding a lot of these internal products that are now available in the market.
That's exactly right. I think when I went full time, we hired some professional developers. I'm not trained academically as a developer. I don't have a degree in it. And so as a self-taught programmer, there are gaps in my knowledge that you really need to fill if you're going to sell a product on a SaaS basis. And, front-end development is something that I really hadn't touched at all. And just kind of orchestration, uptime, security. These are things that we really had to, capabilities we had to develop to be able to sell service as a SaaS, if that makes sense, to software as a service.
But Jesse's ability to combine accounting and engineering, like the accruer code is there since 2015. It's just that how to use it was like you had to save an Excel file and put something in a certain cell, and then when you saved it, it would come around and like that was the controller.
The user
was
interface was very primitive.
Was saving an Excel file, but the idea of how to calculate and book the entries and prorate it and book a catch-up entry automatically and do all of that has been there, right? It's like these diamonds just sitting there, and we're chipping away at all of the debris to make it something that other people can use.
Yeah. Oh man, I love it. I've got so many questions, and we're going to dive in on some of those products. First, Tom, do you code too? Are you an accountant? What's your story?
Like, Tom, what do you do here exactly?
I'm a lifelong BSer. I was an auditor, which just means you pretend to know stuff and tell people they're not doing it correctly. And now I'm a product person, which is the exact same thing. I just go, I wanted to do that, and it's not doing it. No, I mean, I'm an accountant. I have
he's a product manager, so he's in charge of Asana. That's what Tom's.
We don't even, come on. It's a Google sheet, dude. We're back to square one. We're using a Google sheet. This is where the magic is made. No, I mean, I did like RPA and UiPath based automation when I was in, public and stuff like that, and AlterX and those kinds of tools. Never seriously coded in Python or anything like that. But like, I was also interested from a very early age. Like, I was in 6th grade on MySpace making custom like HTML layouts. So like, I was always interested in it and how it worked, but also neither classically trained in it, and kind of just found a niche of communicating accounting and engineering concepts to those respective parties rather than actually having to do any of the work myself, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of listeners are trying to think about, of like, how do I create more efficiency? How do I bring on more technology? How do I get more of my life back? But I will say, just in your eloquent intro, that by bringing up MySpace, you alienated an entire population of Gen Z just like that.
I didn't know I thought there was no Gen Z accountants. I thought it was accounting.
Yeah, the CPA requirement, 150 hours is too much.
Yeah.
Do we want to go down that rabbit hole or talk about finance automation?
No.
I could go on about that one. All right. So super interesting setup here. I want to dive down a couple of paths, but thinking about GAAP accounting, thinking about the more complex side of what we do here, there's a number of platforms and service products available in the market today, rhymes with Milet and Lench, that maybe some people would look at and say, oh, they're automating accounting. And I think they put maybe a bad light on specifically what advanced accounting, accrual accounting looks like, and the complexities that lie therein. And it sounds like with some of the products you have built, you focused more on that advanced accounting, the skill sets that really come at more of the accountant, maybe controller levels. Can you talk about like how you started thinking about items to automate during these processes?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm not going to touch that. We do something similar, but we use a bleep button. So maybe you guys invest in the bleep button. But I think that is an interesting concept in general in terms of the automation space before we talk about right? Like, I think a lot of accountants have been told this is automation, and it's not. It is basically an Excel sheet in a different color with a clunkier interface that throws data at a system. And that's really all it does. And then there's some guy in another country paid a fraction of what a US employee is paid, not saying anything. And they're the ones fixing it all. And then it's, oh, this is automate. That's not automation. It's automation assisted. Let's be honest. Let's be transparent, because there's true automation, there's automation assisted, and then there's building something that's really, really flimsy and having an outsourced person fix it when no one's paying attention. So that being said, I did take the bait. You got me. What processes to automate, Jesse? I feel like it was on a need to automate basis. Like, Accruer came from a nonprofit client who needed to spread something over a certain period of time to be in accordance with their grant funding. And that's where it came from, right? I think it was like, Jesse, you were taking on clients, and everything came from Jesse's absolute refusal to do anything manually. Anything. Ask him about Accruer. Did you ever do it manually here, Jesse?
I mean, no, I never did. I mean, I think the key ingredient there is we started, and we see this as a bit of, it's helpful to have service clients so that we can, while we're building a SaaS company, have another source of revenue. But more importantly, if our responsibility starts at, we have to deliver the books, not we have to like ship a feature. We can talk a little bit more about the difference between being a service company and a product company, and what it meant to productize accruer. But hey, we got to close the books. They don't really care if it's easy for us to book the accruals. They don't really care if it takes us a long time. They care about, do you do the job well, and is it at a price that's competitive with your competitors? So the only incentive there was to build functionality that'll get us the job done without mistakes, right? Anybody in the accounting service business knows that mistakes that you make, the deep dives you have to do, the wild goose chases you have to engage in to troubleshoot a problem, usually that you introduced, sometimes that the client introduced, right? Take more time than ever. Like, it makes a profitable client become, something that makes you sigh when you think about them.
Yeah.
So I built tools to avoid having to do those troubleshooting sessions. And over time, this client does it this way, this client does it that way. All right, I'm going to add a lot of dials so that we can do this client's, like Burger King, have it your way. And then, right, getting into how you productize it, this is where Tom's contribution here is really important. Like the accruer that's available that you can go and buy has it's like a relatively small subset of features
Right.
that the production accruer for our services business includes, because you got to be able to set it up. It can't be like Photoshop where you need to be you need to learn a whole new skill.
Right.
It's got to be easy. So selling products and selling services, there's a synergy there, but there are different sports.
Yeah. And so I want to dive into the product and service side of things because there's a lot of productization happening within the services sector right now. But first, just for context and awareness, can you describe what accruer is just so people can understand what we're talking about here?
For sure. Accruer for QuickBooks Online, you put plain English into the description of a transaction. This expense is for the period March 20th through June 19th. And based on that, it will identify that it's a prepaid expense, calculate and book all of the entries to spread it to the penny in accordance with GAAP, and create the schedule for you. And it does the same process: prepaid expenses, deferred revenue, fixed assets, and payroll accruals. And you don't leave QuickBooks. Like, you're working in QuickBooks, you're writing plain English, and it's happening. And it's empowering people who don't even know accrual accounting to be able to offer it, right?
Yeah. And I think it's important to set that context because what you guys do plays a very critical role in the management of GAAP-based financials or accrual-based financials. To your point, it is a feature within the entire workflow for client management on a monthly basis. You're not sitting here saying, we've automated the entire client relationship. Like, this is a feature that is critical for service delivery and the management of that moving forward.
Absolutely. And even like for our services, like we're tech enabled. We never promise automating everything. You cannot automate everything, right? And we think it's really, really important to recognize where you can and can't, because trying to automate something that shouldn't be automated is going to be worse than automating something that should be automated. You're going to cause more harm than good going down the wrong path.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue into the product versus service, because a lot of these product-based companies that you've seen come out over the years have touted automation of effectively what is a fully engaged client service. Historically, services has been predicated upon relationships, knowing your client's business, knowing their goals, knowing their strategy, and then marrying the tactical work and service to those things. Now, what I've seen in the market, I'd love to hear your take on this, is that product-based companies have seemed to go the opposite direction of you all, in that they've created a product, realized that they can't fully productize accounting services based on the if-then statements that they coded, and now they're starting to bolt on services on top of it in order to self-sustain and drive profitability. What's your take on the market sentiment there, and what are your thoughts?
I'll let you take it, Jesse.
That's a great question. I think I agree. There's some convergence. There are single product companies, right? They just build one piece of it. They're not claiming to automate the whole account. And I think that there's a lot of power in that focus, right? Right? I think you can successfully sell accounting adjacent and accounting software as a single product company if you spend all your time getting to know those workflows. But it's just a different strategy. What we're doing here is trying to take advantage, first of my own intersection between accounting and tech, right? Like to be able to short circuit the product development lifecycle, right? At the beginning, it was just all in my head. I understand the work I need to do, and I have a vision for how to code it up. And now we're trying to build a company that embodies that same closed loop. Like, hey, we don't build software that doesn't get our clients' books done. We prioritize features based on how much work it saves so that we can do better in our service business, and have more money to develop our products. So it's just a different mindset of like, we got to automate this work, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you start from the product angle and go to the and introduce a service, I think at some level, hey, we have something of value. It's hard to learn how to use, or you have to do process changes to integrate it. We're going to help you. And we do some of that too, onboarding services that we provide, because at some level, someone who's going to get leverage out of our products has to do their CAS work a little bit more like us in some ways, right? So not entirely, but we have to show them how to use Booker, how to use Accruer. Oh, now I get it, right? Like having them watch us do it once, often showing instead of telling is often worth its weight in gold, because people have to think of their own process. How would I change my behavior to make this work?
Yeah, I think the services isn't a lifeline for us. Like I feel like, Roman, what you're kind of saying is like, hey, we have this product and like monetization is going a little bit slower, so we better diversify. The flip side is like, we need the services business. We believe in it because, I talk to people who are like, well, we test products for accounting and for tech if you guys ever want us to like be your bug catchers. And I'm like, no, like we have an army of bug catchers. They're sitting behind me. They're doing the
Not
books.
that we have any bugs. We don't have any bugs.
No bugs. Jesse's code is perfect. But to us, it's a strategic angle to make the products better rather than an angle of just giving us additional cash flow while we figure out how do we sell this software product. Don't get me wrong. It helps there, but that's not why we have it.
And I think it's an important distinction too, because everybody who's running a firm is trying to pinpoint those areas within their existing process that they can bring efficiency to. And that could be for margin's sake. It could be for, elevating your team's time to be spent on strategic initiatives, what have you. But I'm curious here, like as our market, as firms productize their offering, you've seen a big trend in like these medallion pricing structures, the bronze, the silver, the gold.
Yep.
In order to effectively understand how to fixed or value-based price specific tiers, you need to operationalize technology really, really well. And so tools like Accruer are critical to operationalize really, really well so that you can focus on how to price effectively, how to manage your team's time and capacity. So like it's a very critical point of how to understand how that entire flywheel works.
For sure. I'm curious, like, Roman, when you think about it, because we have this conversation constantly, figuring out where to automate is absolutely the key. But when I see people choosing, it's not things that we would necessarily automate, right? That's not where our heads go. And we find people and it's like, well, why are you doing this when you could just do that, right? Or like people gravitate towards like automating reporting, right? And that's awesome. But if you're automating the last 10% of the accounting cycle and doing the first 90% manually, is that the best use of your time? Right. That's, and maybe you do a ton of reporting for your clients and that makes it really, really worth it for you. But how do you get to that part? It's like someone just wants a bunch of cherries, right? And they don't want to do all of the ice cream sundae, right? I feel like we're really focused on like the boring part, which is like, do we have the right cream to make the ice cream? So it's interesting to me, like, how do you think a lot of these firms pick what to
That's
do?
A new one.
Is it a
cherry ice cream analogy?
But it's like, is it just because it feels comfortable? Like, oh, I know what reporting is. So like that feels like a good one to do. I'm always curious how people actually select it because I don't know if it's based on the actual time spent rather than this just feels convenient and comfortable for me.
So my thoughts on that is
Yeah.
shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
It's very easy to look at a reporting package. It's very
Yeah.
easy to look at some tangible output that clients can grasp, and they can fawn over this pretty report because that's a deliverable. And so
Yeah.
it's easy to say, oh yeah, I'll spend X amount of dollars per client on this reporting tool because my client will have a better experience. But with a tool like Accruer, it's all internal facing, and so it's
Yeah.
harder to spend the money on something like that the client effectively doesn't really care about. Yet we go back to the workflow and the process of the internal firm. I had a conversation with Corey at Streams, who helps with some automations and Zapier building and stuff like that. It all goes back to like process documentation on client service. Like, how do you deliver a service in a very documented process and workflow, and then start to triage where is the time being spent in that workflow to create efficiency on the back end? And you'll see drastic improvements to your financials after that.
So
100%.
I want to comment on that a little bit, Roman. I think on documentation specifically, because a lot of the audience for our services include accountants. There will be a director of finance, or a CFO, or even an in-house controller or accounting associate who's between us and the decision maker to use us.
And Jesse, hold on. You're specifically talking about our CAS practice, right? In this
Yes,
context?
I am.
Okay, just to bring clarity to not the accruer.
Yeah,
Cool.
right. This gets back to the whole productization idea. How do you documentation? Yes, you must document a process in order to train someone else on it, in order to have a sense, be able to describe it, to analyze it, and decide if there's a better way or if there's not. Right. But I think back to my experience at D. Shaw. A developer told me that good code, people talk about in code, you got to put comments. You got to put like document strings into your code to explain what it does. Like, that's kind of a best practice in like computer coding 101. But this developer said the best code doesn't need documentation, because you choose variable names and logic that's easy to follow. And I think there's something there when it comes to the productization. Yes, of course, if it's not obvious, the best product is easy to use. You don't have to read the manual. The best process is easy to understand. It's intuitive. It's an ideal to strive for.
Yeah.
But the less intuitive it is, the more documentation you must write.
Totally agree. But I would also say, in order to identify those areas in which you can introduce automation and introduce efficiency, there has to be some sort of process documented so you can just have a starting point. And I think that comes
100%.
back to is your team recording time on tasks within a client relationship? If they're not, you probably don't have enough data to understand how then to pick apart your workflow to automate it. And so I agree with you in the sense that overload of documentation can feel really burdensome and clunky, and it's not always necessary, but it can provide a lot of visibility to those areas in which you can scale more effectively.
100%.
Makes total
You
sense.
need to, it's like you brainstorm ideas of everything you think you can possibly automate, right? Then you have to kind of power rank them based on level of effort, right? Potential impact. And then you're like, okay, these are my good candidates. Let's work backwards, right? Are they like at that point, you already know that they're error prone, monotonous, right? Like very, very heavy
Our
volume.
discovery
Then you're
form is good for
100%
this.
right. Yeah, but to Roman's point, when you're sometimes people will come to us and go, I need an automation for cleanup. What does that mean? Right? You have to go really, really deep. Is it that there's a bunch of bank reconciliations that have never been done? Is it a bunch of recategorization? If it's recategorization, what are the rules that you need to recategorize based on? So you have to think very thoroughly about something before you try to automate it, because otherwise you're just going to be shooting in the dark. So I think you guys are, Romans, how do you start thinking about it? And then Jesse, you're saying this is what to strive for when you actually do end up automating it, right?
Yeah, I also think it's trying to automate it for yourself with Zapier, for example, another RPA is, I think the level of documentation and research is much lower than when you're trying to build a product. Right? By all means, just hack away at it, try to get it to work, and then document whatever works. I mean, look at me. I'm a tinkerer. I'm the guy who's going to go in and just try to write some code to make it work. But, it's very different to say, all right, I've built an automation that I think works well for me. How do I share that? Right? How do I share that with somebody else who's going to easily figure out how to use it, who's going to see it and say, I want that.
Roman, what do
That's
you
a
use
big
to document processes?
Notion.
What do you use?
Notion?
We use Notion.
Yeah.
We use Notion.
Do you use
too.
any automation tools to like track it? Have you tried any of them?
In terms of tracking what?
Like I've seen ones that are like, I'll watch you work and then I'll write down your steps.
No, kind of. Like I'll
Yeah.
talk to ChatGPT and it'll document everything that I say, and I'll prompt it in certain ways to produce an output that then I can port over to Notion and categorize in a
Fair.
really specific way. But at the same time, like the intent behind creating the process is to enable scalability, because there are a slew of clients that on a monthly basis, we know we're going to be doing the same things. Now, within that client relationship, there's always going to be nuances and things that need to be managed outside of that process. But without that, we don't even know how to start to introduce scalability, because ultimately the firms that are operating at 10, 20, 50 million a year, they are pretty dialed in on process.
For sure. Yeah, it's like anything with documentation is hard because you have to go back and keep updating it, right? It's people treat it as a one-time chore, and it's not. If you're only going to do it once, it's going to be a waste. You know?
And it's all dependent upon your firm life cycle. So right now we're in year 2 of operations. Like every 3 months, effectively, our processes are changing and we're reinventing ourselves. And that is really hard. Like Jesse, you talk about tinkering. Like I'm with you, man. Like I tinker a lot. But to some extent, that's dangerous for scalability.
Yeah.
Because the more that I tinker, the more that we've got to retrain our team and our clients and our deliverables. And like it gets really hard.
Totally
It's
agree.
As the tinkerer of our product documentation, I have to be honest, we've been able to make simpler product documentation as we've iterated, right? Like people keep getting stuck on a particular feature and we go, well, we were thinking about this wrong. This isn't how other people think about it. Let's just change it. And I can just delete these 3 pages because now it'll just make sense. Right. So keeping it clean is tough.
It is, but let's snap back to reality real quick, because 97% of firms aren't updating their documentation. And ultimately, they're just looking for more efficient ways to deliver a service, to improve their margins, to help their team, manage load more effectively, to reduce burnout. Like they're trying to tactically tie these tools that are available in market to either a client experience or an employee experience. And so that's how I think most firm owners are looking at tools in the market of like, all right, can I save some time? Can I save some money? Can I create a better experience? Is that how you guys have seen, your interactions with prospects on the accruer side?
For sure. It's funny because some people are looking to improve accuracy. Like for some people, it's like, man, the amount of times I've gone to a client meeting thinking something is done and it's not, and then I have egg on my face or I have to like dance around it. And now you're telling me I could just like change plain English. Like that's a huge win for them. Others are really, really focused on, improving their margins, right? Hey, we switched to a subscription-based model. We want to get our costs really low. Others, it's really dealing with the staffing issue, right? Like we have so much business and I just can't possibly staff it right now. And it's funny because any type of like marketing is about like finding the pain point. There's so many different unique pain points in accounting right now, right? The firms that look the same exact way on paper have completely different pain points. And it's interesting right now, right? To figure out what is everybody actually trying to solve. And some people want to take over the world. Some people are like, I want to quadruple my firm. Other people are like, I just want to go to the beach and not work on Fridays. And you have to get to know the person you're dealing with and what their goals are, right? So as much as it's SaaS, it's still service.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because when you tie it to a firm runner's goal, it completely changes the conversation. I talked to a firm owner out of Florida who has 3 staff, going to do about 1.2 to 1.5 million in revenue. So his revenue per employee is sky high, very niched business, but their processes is nailed down. He's like, I don't even want to grow. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
I feel healthy. I feel like energized, and I have enough time to spend with my kids. And like, that's very different than the firm owner who's like, I want to 3x in the next 2 years. Like, man,
ambition.
Yeah, I think that is the variability, right? The heterogeneity of what people are looking for, both in services and products, is one of the reasons why I like selling both. I view, before we started selling SaaS, we only sold services. There were still very high touch clients, right? Paying a lot of money every month. And then there were very low touch that don't want a lot and aren't willing to pay a lot. I view SaaS products as the very lowest touch point that you can buy, right? You're definitely not getting someone to review your books if you buy a SaaS product for it. But if you're a firm and you're doing that yourself, you don't need it, right? One of the drivers of releasing SaaS were clients that had very sophisticated in-house team members that said, listen, I don't really want to pay you. Hey, you have to pay us to do your bank rec and your AP data entry and a review. I don't really want to pay you for that. Can I just have Booker? No, we don't do that. Well, all right, now we do that. Now you can just get Booker. So they want a lower touch point. Meet the market, right?
Yeah, it's a good point, because now a lot of firms are being battled with lower fees and the commoditization of the service overall at the lowest of levels. And I think there's probably a lot of firm owners that are listening to this saying like, oh, well, you can't automate my relationship with my clients. Like, if I bring on more SaaS tools, it's going to deteriorate that relationship. And it's like, you got to shift gears. You got to think about it differently. So have you been faced with that pushback at all? How do you talk to the relationship side of firm running?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it's going to give you more time to talk to your clients, right? Like, the one thing that we're doing is eliminating the work that nobody wants to do manually, right? Like, we're not organizing stuff for you. The automation is doing the work. You are no longer booking manual journal entries. Think about however much time that is. Now you can meet with your client more often, right? You can send them a more thoughtful email, right? You can dedicate more time to the relationship and to the value, to the analysis, right? Your month end close email, you can take the 90 minutes usually spent wrestling with the spreadsheet and put it towards actually thinking about their books, right? And sending them something that matters. So you're right. You can't automate the client relationship. You use automation to enhance the client relationship. That's what you're good at. Spend more time doing it. Spend more time doing it.
Mic drop.
There you go. Like Jesse mic dropped when we started.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out.
That's true. But I mean, to your point, like 10 times out of 10, I would rather see 1 hour of billable time go to strategically educating a client on how and why deferred revenue is important than spending that time booking that entry or those entries, right?
For sure. 100%. Spend less time doing things manually, right? Knowing that they're going to be done correctly. Like, FinOptimal does not have an outsourced team booking your accruals while you sleep. All right. Like, this is truly going to work, and you can watch it work. That's a take it to the blood bank guarantee.
That's the Tom promise.
It's a Tom promise.
I mean, Tom's the right person to answer that because he talks to accounting firms all day. He hears what they have, so I mean, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have someone running the product function that's responsive to what customers, which we have a different name internally for customers versus clients, right? The products are selling to the customers, and what they want is a key element of what we should actually productize, build, make robust, and extend. It's along a spectrum.
All right. I like it. And we could go, for another 30 minutes, another 2-3 hours on this. I've got one hard-hitting question, and then I want to get a little bit more info on how to get a hold of you guys. But the hard-hitting question, are you a service company or a product company?
Both.
Cop out.
It's I would say we're a service company because software as a service is a service. And again, I view that as the lowest touch point, the lowest touch way to engage with FinOptimal. And I think the fact that our software is born out of service makes us a service company first. We care about the results, not just about the process. And I mean, but look, it's It's a good question because strategically, I'm sure my board would want me to answer
I
one
was
way
going
or
to
the
say, it
other.
depends who's asking. If a VC
Right,
is
yeah,
asking, we're a SaaS
yeah.
company.
Investor, yeah. Push comes to shove, I would go with service there.
I agree. I 100% agree with you.
All right. You heard it here first. For all of those in market that have seen your name and have kind of like come to some degree of awareness of who FinOptimal is, FinOptimal is a service company with some pretty banger products. Is that a good description?
It's a good description. We'll see next year when the SaaS is 10 times bigger than services. We might have a new answer for you.
Perfect. Okay, so as we move forward in 2024 here, where can people find you, and how can people get a hold of you guys?
FinOptimal.com. Check us out. See the accruer, booker, everything else we have in the hopper on there. You can find us on LinkedIn. Jesse posts stuff a lot, and then I comment making fun of it. So you can find us in the comment section. But yeah, check us out.
Perfect. And any conferences you guys are going to be at this year?
Scaling New Heights. We'll have a booth. I don't know the number off the top of my head. And then QuickBooks Connect, if they let us in. Hopefully they hear this and give us a booth this year.
I'll see what we can do with QuickBooks Connect.
Yeah.
But FinOptimal.com and Scaling New Heights. Check out Tom and Jesse. Go give them a connection, follow on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, Tom has about 1,000 headshots on LinkedIn that you can go peruse and then reach out to him with any questions.
Exactly. If you want to know how to use AI, hit me up.
Perfect.
Thanks so much, Roman.
All right,
really
gents.
enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Roman.
Yeah, likewise. Cheers. For listening in today. If you enjoyed this pod, don't forget to share and write a review. This is going to help other firm owners just like you find our podcast and get insights into how to grow their firm. Stay tuned.